Welcome to Executive Leaders Radio, your spot in the corner office, the radio show where executives share their secrets to success. Executive Leaders Radio.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, with my co-hosts, Matthew Shapiro from the law firm Obermeyer and David Scheinberg Cressa are my co-hosts. Matthew, can you give us a rundown on who we have on the air today, please?
Sure can. We have a great show coming up. We have Peter Reily, the president and managing partner of Councilor Buchanan and Mitchell. Then we have Stephanie Olson, a partner at FH+H, Matthew Hutchinson, founder and partner at Tegra Analytics, and Ed Barry, the CEO of Capital Bank.
Well, let's get to know our first guest, Peter Reily. Pete Reily, president and managing partner of Councilor Buchanan and Mitchell. Peter, what is Councilor Buchanan and Mitchell?
We're a CPA firm located in Bethesda, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. We have over 100 people doing a number of niches and services.
And where are you from originally?
Alexandria, Virginia.
And how many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
I'm third of 4 kids.
So what was going on with you 8 to 14? Like, what was really absorbing you? What was the big thing you were involved with 8 to 14?
I was swimming most of the time. I was part of a swim team and enjoyed it.
And that led to something. What did that lead to?
Well, I started coaching or teaching other kids how to swim early on, I think at age 13, and it grew from there into managing the pool and coaching the swim team.
Wait a second. As opposed to jumping from one thing to the next, you started swimming, and then you ended up teaching, and then you ended up managing the pool. Okay. So you evolve, your nature is to evolve one thing to the next. How many years have you been with this accounting firm?
42.
Huh. Really? Have things changed over the course of time at the accounting firm?
It sure has. We've acquired 7 firms in the last 5 years, so we are who we are recently.
Well, it sounds to me that as a kid, your nature was to keep evolving. I mean, you started swimming, you began teaching, and then you became the pool manager. Well, let me ask you a question. In order to begin teaching, you had to deal with the parents, aside from just the kids. What did the parents think of you?
Well, I think they trusted me. Otherwise, they wouldn't. I wouldn't have had the number of lessons that I was able to.
Really? And who gave you the job as pool manager?
Parents, eventually.
So it sounds to me like you were able to deal with a variety of constituencies. It sounds to me that somehow you got prepared at a young age, not only to deal with your clients, but also to build a team. Am I correct about that? Different constituencies in your childhood, moving from swim instructor to the teacher to managing the pool. Same thing you're doing with this accounting firm, dealing with a wide variety of people. Is there some sort of similarity there?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know what was worse sometimes, the parents or the children, but it did give you an opportunity to deal in a variety of ways.
And I also understand that when you became the pool manager, you sort of looked forward to that because that led to a bunch of other opportunities for you. What was being a pool manager? Why did you want to be the pool manager? What did that give you to do? What other activities did that lead to?
Oh, you were able to manage. You were able to manage the lifeguards. You were able to manage the schedules. You were able to, I was also had a contract to coach the swim team, so I was able to make that work as well.
So your middle name is manager, isn't it?
Well, no, it isn't. Bernard.
Yeah, but it is. Your nature is to go manage. Matthew, give me a hand with him, please.
Yeah, Pete, I'm really intrigued by this. I think you said you started teaching swimming at 13. Who were you teaching when you were 13?
The younger kids on the team.
You were teaching the younger kids on the team. Did someone ask you to teach the younger kids on the team?
Well, I've got the overflow from a very good coach at the time, and he had identified me as a potential teacher, I guess.
And when you say you got the overflow, but he asked you to teach those younger kids, right?
Yes.
And I mean, I remember when I was a kid, if one kid tried to coach other kids, sometimes they wouldn't really appreciate it. Did the younger kids appreciate what you were doing with them?
A lot. We made it fun. I think a lot of them did.
How do you make it fun?
I just remembered that I decided at one point to break the small, young kids away and call them little sharks. And we would just work as a group, different than the older kids. Or regular.
How'd you learn to do that?
I don't know. But the movie Jaws came out, and so I bought T-shirts, and I actually ironed the Jaws logo on the front of the T-shirt, and each kid was given, when they graduated, little sharks.
So you have a creativity about you in terms of creating teams, don't you? What's that have to do with building this accounting firm to 100 people, Councilor Buchanan and Mitchell? The fact that you were breaking the teams and giving them shirts and calling them sharks, swimming. What's that have to do with what you're doing nowadays, this creativity and management?
Well, you know, when you acquire a firm, there's a lot of risk involved. There's a lot of things that people aren't used to. They don't know what it's going to be like the next day. Mm-hmm. So I think the trust that my partners have provided me, willing to support these initiatives, is
they sound like they really do trust you, David.
It sounds like you're a fantastic coach and a mentor and a teacher. How did you handle difficult personalities?
Listening. You know, you allow people to say what they're thinking, and after a short period of time, usually they themselves, if they're being ridiculous, this may start becoming apparent to them. But at other times, you have to carry a heavy hand. You know, you just can't get walked over. The firm's there for a purpose. That's to serve our clients, and you have to be doing that.
What others? You mentioned you were playing baseball when you were a kid. What was your role on the team?
Second baseman, batted second.
What was the personality trait that you brought to that second baseman role on that team?
I mean, I tried my hardest. I wasn't very good. But I was committed to the team and being part of the team.
Yeah, that's sort of, in the green room we were getting to know you a little bit, and your nature is to be pretty committed, isn't it? You don't tend to do things uncommitted. Is that fair to say?
I all in is a pretty good way to describe me. I would say.
Matthew,
this year we are, our theme for our firm is inspiration and training. Those are the two words that we're trying to weave into everything we do at CBM.
Well, that's who you are.
That's what we wanted to do.
Well, that's who you are. That's one of the reasons they want you to be the managing partner. Matthew?
Pete, you told us in the green room that your father had 3 rules. What were the 3 rules?
Respect your mother, get a haircut, and go to Mass on Sunday.
And tell us about the haircut thing while you were growing up.
Well, in the early 70s, having long hair was a sign of, you were liberated or free or, part of the revolution, what have you.
Did you get your hair cut?
I think what we settled on couldn't be below your collar.
The point of the matter is your father was traveling internationally, you mentioned to us in the green room.
Yeah.
And and he asked you to do those 3 things. And the fact is that you did those 3 things. You took responsibility because you didn't want to cause trouble. Because, again, you wanted to manage things. You wanted everybody to move together. Your nature is to manage things, to herd the cats, to make sure everybody's on the same page, to listen. It sounds to me like it's one of the reasons that the integrations of this accounting firms work. It's difficult to acquire other accounting firms. There's different cultures. But it sounds to me, because you're a good listener, that you're able to actually do these acquisitions and create a consistent culture, aren't you?
Yeah, if you provide a mission to people, give them projects, join them together, different locations, different firms, and then they're collaborating with one another, and it starts to build and become, successful.
It's just like what you did with those kids, breaking them up into smaller teams and giving them T-shirts with different logos on it. It's the same kind of stuff you're doing now. It's the same stuff you're doing right now is, you've acquired these other firms, but you're giving them projects to do together, to bring them together. You're a natural understander of how to create the human dynamic. Was that mom or dad that had that ability?
Oh, I would say both. I mean, my mom was definitely, nuclear mom. She was, on top of us. But my dad was very creative. In fact, he went all over the world selling power plants, and that takes a bit of creativity, learning different demographics of countries and what have you.
So you're a combination of both. They both had this ability to They created you. I mean, you understand how to create a team, both from your parents. What's the website address of this organization known as Councilor Buchanan and Mitchell? What's your website?
cbmcpa.com.
Let me have that one more time.
cbmcpa.com.
We've been speaking with Peter Reily, who's the president and managing partner of Councilor Buchanan and Mitchell here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com. That's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders, and we'll be back in a moment. Don't go away right after this break. Stick around. And your name and organization is?
Joe Kovacs, Councilor Buchanan and Mitchell.
And what's your role at Councilor Buchanan and Mitchell?
I'm the Director of Marketing and Business Development.
And how young were you when this business development and marketing thing began to show up, the ability to see other possibilities?
Probably about 14 years old.
What were you doing?
I was working summers at a Catholic school, helping to paint and clean classrooms.
Yeah, and what happened from that?
Well, from one project, I started seeing other opportunities and mentioned them to my colleagues, and suddenly my role was expanding.
Like what? What came from the painting?
I'd be cleaning the classroom. I'd look outside.
What's that have to do with what's that have to do with what you're doing nowadays?
Seeing new opportunities to help clients with their business.
Mm-hmm. So you know the inside of Councilor Buchanan. You understand the capabilities to help your clients. What's the website address of this organization?
cbmcpa.com.
And your name again is?
Joe Kovacs.
And this has been your Business Spotlight. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Stephanie Olson, partner at FH+H. Stephanie, what is FH+H? What are you guys doing?
We're a full-service law firm, and I'm the chair of the Corporate and Business Transactions Department.
Ooh, okay. Where are you from originally?
I grew up in Poughkeepsie.
Poughkeepsie, New York. And how many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
I am the youngest of 2 sisters.
All right. And tell us, what was going on with you, like primary activity you were engaged with 8 to 14 years old?
I was a busy kid. I wanted to play organized sports, and boys baseball was the closest I could find, so I joined the boys baseball team.
How young were you when you joined the boys baseball team?
I was in 3rd grade.
3rd grade. Weren't you a little intimidated getting involved on the boys baseball team, being the only girl?
You know, I wasn't. I think at that point I was taller and a little bigger than all the boys, and I thought it was fun. I wanted to be out there playing sports, and I didn't like ballet, which was the other choice.
All right, so you decided to join the boys baseball team, and you didn't feel intimidated. Okay, Matthew, could you give me a hand, please?
Yeah, how did the boys treat you on the team?
I think they were fine with it. I think that once they realized that I was not going to put up with it, and that I was in it. I was all in. I was willing to get dirty, get my hands, do whatever it took.
And what was your role on the team? What'd you do?
Well, I luckily was the only lefty on the team, so I got to be first baseman. And I think that everybody was so young that it threw everybody off, having a girl and a lefty, because I looked funny at the plate to them, and the guys would get to first plate, the first base, the other team, take a look at me. Distract them a little bit.
Did the infielders have to take anything off the throw to throw the ball over to you?
No, definitely not.
How'd they learn that?
I caught it. I was good. I was also a vocal team player. I got it. Communication.
And did you understand the game well?
Not as well as others do. I mean, I got it, but I'm not a big baseball fan.
Well, how did you start playing baseball? Why did you start on the team?
I wanted to play sports, and that's what there was. So I kind of took the opportunity there was.
You told us you also had a sister who played on that team, who played baseball on the boys team too, right?
Yes, she started out playing, and I followed her.
And tell us about your sister a little bit. Older sister.
She's 3 years older. She's a bankruptcy attorney, and she's a good big sister.
What was it like growing up with a big sister? Was she do everything? Like, did you have to live up to her or what?
You know, we're so different in personality that I think that it was better for both of us. We're just very different people, and I think we complement each other rather than compete.
How about your mom? Tell me about your mom.
My mom's awesome. She, got married at 19 and supported my dad through college and grad school. And then when I was growing up, she went back to college. She went to Vassar. I lived in Poughkeepsie. She went to Vassar, graduated. I was at her graduation. And then she got her master's at Marist College, but also in Poughkeepsie.
How did that feel watching your mom graduate?
It's amazing. I mean, she really took the situation that she was in and absolutely made the most of it. Great role model.
What did you learn from that you bring with you to your clients and to your business every day?
Well, I think, I get my clients with the situation that they're in, and I make the most of it, right? You don't always get the perfect deal and the perfect leverage and the perfect terms. And so you see what you have and you put together your best foot forward and go with it, right? You can only take what you have.
I understand you also played soccer as a kid. What was your role on that team?
I was the goalie.
And what is the personality trait of a goalie?
Well, for me, I mean, it's the last defense. It's important, and it's also stressful because, there's only one or two goals. You don't want the pressure. So I became very good at sizing up the opposition and then rearranging people. And again, I was very vocal in terms of, who should be where, what should happen, because I didn't want to have to be the last defense, right? The job of the rest of the team, you're only as strong as your weakest link in soccer.
What's that have to do with what you do nowadays?
I'm always adjusting and finding opportunity and finding the right fit and moving people around and getting the situation, maximizing the situation, I guess.
Also, what came out earlier, as you mentioned, not only were you the goalie, but you also were the captain. How'd you get to be the captain of that team?
I think I was the de facto captain just because I was always yelling out instructions and bossing everybody around. Mm-hmm. So I think they just sort of gave me the job that I had kind of assumed.
Mm-hmm. What's that have to do with what you're doing nowadays, being the captain?
Well, I think I like to see a situation that I can improve, that I can make better and bring my skills, and I can help everybody maximize, even though I might not be the expert and, what everybody else on the field does, taking a big picture approach.
So you're doing mergers and acquisitions. You're helping CEOs buy and sell companies, parts of their companies, sell their So you're in the middle of it all. You like really getting into the fray like you did in that boys baseball team, but yet you also like being the captain of what you got to do. I see you smiling too. Matthew, what are you thinking?
Yeah, well, not only is she doing that, but in the M&A world, I mean, we know most of the partners who are leading those things are men. And I feel like, you're playing. And how many of your partners are men versus women?
There's definitely more male partners.
And so like you were playing baseball as a little kid where you were the only woman on the team, the only girl on the team at the time, and it was like unremarkable to you. And now here you are and you're like running the M&A world and you're probably the only woman in the room quite often. And tell me, where does that inner strength come from? Where does that ability to be the only woman in the room and be so accomplished come from?
Mm-hmm.
I think I haven't ever made it a factor. I think I just go and I do it. I'm so focused on what I'm doing that it's not about who I am. I mean, I think that there are better intuition.
Sounds like mom had a lot of the same stuff going on. I understand when you were 14, you got a job as a gift wrapper. How'd you get that job?
I wanted to work. My sister had a job and I wanted to work too. And so I went to the strip mall that was not far from my house, and I went into each store and asked if I could get a job, and finally someone said, "Can you wrap gifts?" I said,
"Of course." So you were 14, so you knocked on doors, you had a lot of guts knocking on doors, you got a job as a gift wrapper, and I understand that you stuck with that job for quite a number of years. What role had you vaulted yourself to from the gift wrapping role at that store?
Well, I started, just keeping up for people on break, so I would go rotate throughout the departments. But I kept that job. I worked, Saturdays, throughout high school.
What role had you vaulted yourself to in that firm?
I was floater, which meant that I could go into any department and be proficient in it. And, if somebody was out or I was a fill-in person, I could do all the departments.
So what's that ability of yours to do a little bit of everything? How's that helped you, and how's that helped your clients and your career at FH+H?
Well, I think I'm good at coming in and assessing a situation and understanding what I need to do, understanding where my limitations are, where I need to ask for help, but also sizing up the situation.
Mm-hmm. And
Stephanie, how would your clients describe you?
I've heard two things I heard from my clients not that long ago is one person said, everything I do, I put in a chart. I love to chart information. Any information I'm parlaying, they're like, I've never seen anybody use more charts and spreadsheets. Probably is one of the things.
So you like to keep yourself organized. You like to keep things organized.
I think in columns and rows, I think.
What else did you hear about yourself? Mm-hmm.
I'm a getting to yes person. I mean, I'm always thinking that there's a way we can do this. I know we can find a way, and I think that we need to just get there. Like compromise has got to come from both sides, but we can get to yes. We can get to a solution.
Well, you're built for your job, making deals happen. What's the website address of this organization, FH+H?
FH+Firm.com.
Let me have that one more time.
FH+H Firm. So.
We've been speaking with Stephanie Olson, partner of FH+H here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com. That's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. We will be back in a moment. Right after this quick break, don't go away. Be back shortly.
We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Hank Boyer, and I'd like to introduce you to our next guest, Matthew Hutchison, who's founder and partner of Tegra Analytics. What is Tegra Analytics? What do you guys do out there?
We do a lot of data analysis and statistics for the biopharma industry. Most of the work is in sales, marketing, and clinical studies.
How large or how small is your organization?
There's 20 of us, and we have 3 offices, one in Pennsylvania, one in South Carolina, and one in Tennessee.
Wow. So how'd you get started?
I got started in 2002. A man named Gary gave us a call. He was really excited about some of the analytical work that my partner Dwayne and I were doing. And Dwayne lived in South Carolina with his family, and I was up in Pennsylvania, and he really wanted us to support a $4 billion product and help them launch it.
Fantastic. So you've been there 17 years and watched the organization grow. But take us back in time. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Horseheads, New York.
And that's fairly rural, right?
Yeah, there's about 5,000 of us in the town.
3 older siblings. You were the youngest. What impact did being the youngest growing up in Horseheads, New York, have on you?
Well, let's see. I had an older brother, Kevin. He was in the Navy, and he was like a Top Gun fighter pilot. Big deal. And it's hard to fill those shoes. But being the youngest in a small town, for me, was fantastic because I got to play all the time. And my parents let me do that. And it was fantastic. It was really, really wonderful. Lots of wiffle ball.
So what did Mom do and what did Dad do for a living?
So Mom, just like your previous guest, she was the stay-at-home mom. She ran the family. And my dad worked as a draftsman and an engineer at U.S. Steel.
And who are you more like, Mom or Dad?
I'm a little bit like my dad in terms of how the analytical brain works, which worked out well for my business in the future.
But Grandma was sort of a big influence in your life, too. Tell us a little bit about her.
Yeah, so my grandma was incredibly loving, super kind, and she was, the phrase is the glue of the family. She would always be there for everybody all the time, for all our brothers in equal ways.
Now, Matt, was your grandma like that with everyone for as long as you could remember?
It was pretty amazing, actually. She would be available at 2 o'clock in the morning and just say, "Hey, I've been waiting for your call. I was awake." And you're like, "You were awake?" "Yep, I knew you were going to call tonight." Even though obviously she wasn't, but it was incredibly sweet.
Now, Matt, you clearly recognize that and appreciate that. So how do you How do you take what you've seen and learned and felt, most importantly, from your grandmom into the work that you do today with those who you work with and for?
So my employees and my team, I think of them as colleagues. I don't really think of them as employees. And we have really, really low turnover at my firm. We've only had a couple of people leave. Most of the people there stay 7, 10, 15 years. And we try to develop loving, kind relationships with everyone on our team.
So that's interesting, but let me take you back again to ages 8 to 14. How young were you when you first started making money?
I was probably 13. I was doing lawns. I worked at a junkyard for a short period. I worked in a movie theater. I worked at a grocery store.
So what did you do different than the other kids that had part-time jobs?
Well, one interesting thing was when I was mowing a lawn for this one woman and her sister. They lived together, and they were older, than probably in their 80s. And I would visit them all the time, even after the lawn didn't need to be mowed, like in Christmas time or Easter or whatever, and I'd drop by. And I remember one time, about 4 years later, I dropped by, and the woman had made me some gloves and a little hat that she knitted, and it was just incredibly sweet.
So you're all about long-term relationships.
Yeah, so you had said in the green room that you and your brothers didn't really fight all that much. It wasn't a whole lot of competition. Your dad was at the same job for 30 years. He was married for 30 years, right? You've been at your job now for 17. There's a lot of stability in your past, I think, in a world where that's in short supply. So is that something that is innate for you, or was it something that you emulated based on these really strong characters in your life?
Yeah, I do think it's emulated. I think my grandmother and my parents all were instrumental in me trying to develop and keep long-term relationships in my life.
Yeah, and so I guess the way that you run your business now is that kind of a foundational core value for you? Or
So it's an interesting question because a lot of our work is all referral work. So if we have some customers and the customers are like, hey, we want to refer you to someone else, or even if they leave their company and go to a different company, we've had people like Scott and Bill. They've gone with us at 4 different companies over the last 15 years. And every time they go to a new company, they're like, hey, Matt, hey, Dwayne, hey, Dave, we need some more analytical work. Can you help us with this new product?
Right. And that only happens with a strong relationship. That's not by accident.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Matt, how young were you when you discovered your love for analytics?
I was really good at math as a kid. Like, really good. In fact, my son, who's 12, he's in 6th grade, but he's in 8th grade math. He's really, really good at math as well.
Now, do you see a lot of yourself in him?
Yeah, it's incredible. He's got the same body type, too, the same little, brain, how the brain works, right? When you look at a situation, analyze it numerically. Yeah.
Now, did you relate your love for analytics with sports?
Very much so. So I'm very mathematical, but I'm reasonably athletic. And I play a lot of golf, baseball, racquetball, ping pong, all these different sports. And I love when I was a kid in that age group, like when I was 8, 9 years old, my friend Arnie and I used to watch every Yankees game every night.
Now, between sports, for baseball in particular, baseball is a perfectly even keel of relationship and analytics. Is that where your love for it came from?
I think it's a big part of it. The seeing the numbers on the screen and watching the players and how especially when you're on the field and you're like, is the guy fast or slow? Is he a big hitter? Is he a pull hitter? Is he going to hit it to the right or the left? Like all those things when I'm playing shortstop just kind of is going through my brain. If the ball's hit hard to me, I'm going to throw it here. If it's hit soft, I go here. It's at the left field, I throw it to second base. Right field, I throw it to third base. Like all those things are in my head. All the analytical combinations when I'm playing a game.
Matt, it's clear that relationships are key to you. So let me ask you a question. Would you prefer several relationships where you touch and impact a lot of people, or just a few relationships where we can get deeper with regards to those relationships?
It's the second one. So I do prefer to have a handful of deeper relationships.
Why is that,
though? I think that's based on my grandma. I feel like I'm bringing it back to Leonora Campanelli at this point. But, yeah, she was very instrumental in that.
And now, what about childhood with Dan Apgar? During childhood with him being much bigger than you?
Yeah, so I was a very tiny child. So I was one of the smallest kids all through 10th grade. And imagine Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as a 7th grader. That was this guy, Dave. And he was like my protector. I called him dad. He called me son. So I was really little, and I had no issues at all being protected as in my like 7th and 8th grade.
Did you find it easy to form those kind of relationships with people?
Yeah, I try to be judgment-free with people in general.
Do you think that's helped you retain all of your employees for the amount the terms that they've been there for?
It does. I find when they make mistakes, I don't really get that upset with a mistake. I'm like, how do we solve this mistake? Let's move forward. We'll solve it. I don't want them or me or anybody to feel bad. I want the client to be happy. Mm-hmm. And so it's all about solving the failure or solving the problem, not about dwelling in that particular failure.
Why is that important to you? That issue of solving the problem?
It could be analytical, and it could be just my past. So when things are analytical, and I like to solve things as a mathematical brain, I do like to see the situation, execute it, and then just be done with it.
Speaking about the brain, you told us something in the green room. Things constantly percolate in my mind. What do you mean? What are you talking about there?
Yeah, so I assess the situation. I try to look at all the different options that there can be. And especially in statistics in my field, there's no one answer. There's several answers. And if you have 4 or 5 stat people looking at the problem, they're all going to come up with slightly different solutions. And there's no single right one. So I like to look at all the variations on a situation.
So what's the secret sauce of melding that together?
So the secret sauce is that I have a certain skill, and my team has a certain skill, which is analytics, and that all the people we work with are really good at what they're good at. We work with doctors a lot; they're good at treating patients and doing clinical work. We work with salespeople that are really good at motivating people, and we blend the analytics into interdisciplinary. We blend it, and then together the 2 things or the 3 things work out really, really well.
So what's the website for your company?
It's tegraanalytics.com.
One more time?
tegraanalytics.com.
We've been speaking with Matt Hutcherson, who is founder and partner of Tegra Analytics, here on Executive Leaders Radio with my co-host Alan Berkeley of Meridian Bank, Russ Stark of Think Company, and Chris Kieser of ESC Marketing. Don't forget to visit executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. We'll be right back in a moment, right after this business spotlight.
Recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, Executive Leaders Radio. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable. Yes, this radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors for free exposure. Back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, and we'd like to introduce Ed Barry, CEO of Capital Bank. Ed, what is Capital Bank?
We're $1.5 billion community bank based in Washington, D.C., but serving the greater region and some parts nationally.
And where are you from originally?
I grew up in Staten Island, New York.
And how many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
I have 2 older brothers with a pretty large age gap, and I am the youngest by far.
Youngest of 3. All right. 8 to 14 years old. What was the primary stuff that you were up to 8 to 14?
It was interesting. I had a lot of opportunity to use my imagination during that time period. Both my parents worked long hours. My brothers were much older. So I was one of those latchkey kids that you came home and whatever you felt like doing, that's what you did. So I went things from organizing sports in a neighborhood, baseball, football, basketball, to reading, to exploring, to playing Dungeons and Dragons.
All right. So how many kids were in the neighborhood?
About 10 to 20 people came from all over to get in our games.
And what was your role with the 10 to 20 kids regarding all the different sports that were being played?
Yeah, a lot of time it was organizing, since everything was really unstructured. It was trying to get people together, get them out of their house, find something to do, get everyone organized around a sports, teams. So trying to put all those pieces together. Sometimes you're leading, sometimes you're leading from behind, sometimes the front.
Mm-hmm. And what did mom and dad do for a living?
My father was a principal of a public school. My mom was a high school Spanish teacher.
Mm-hmm. So dad was a principal and mom was a teacher. And how'd that affect you when you were a kid? Did they look over your work? Did you go to your dad's school? Did your mom know all the other teachers? What happened there?
No, they were in schools pretty far away from where we lived.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of trust of, you're going to have to figure this out on your own. And as long as I performed and got good grades, they gave me a lot of slack.
Mm-hmm. All right, Matthew, give me a hand.
Yeah, Ed, you said you were the youngest of three with a decent-sized age gap. How many years was the age gap?
My oldest brother was 9 years older than me, and my middle brother was 6 years.
And what'd that do to you, having two so much older brothers?
It made you even more isolated, because while you had siblings, they were at different stages of their lives, doing their own thing. So just even sometimes when they were there, they weren't really there.
And so you told us earlier that you spent a lot of time reading and playing D&D. What were you reading?
A lot of fantasy books, science fiction, mysteries, anything that really stressed my imagination.
And what were you doing in Dungeons and Dragons? What was your role?
Yep, I was always the dungeon master, the guy kind of organizing everything and setting the world and kind of guiding people through it.
How did you get to be the dungeon master all the time?
I think I was able to leverage a lot of the readings I had to create kind of just a strong imagination and kind of that pulled people in.
And were you a good dungeon master?
Yeah, I've always thought I was pretty good, but I guess it's, people always came back for more.
What made you good?
It was the way you kind of use vivid details that people really felt they were part of what was going on and to transcend from where they were to something a little bit bigger.
And tell me, what's being a good dungeon master have to do with being the CEO of a bank?
Well, I think a lot of kind of all my childhood activities, it relates to, hey, there isn't a lot of structure. So you got to put the pieces together and create a compelling world that people want to buy in. We have 250 employees and thousands of customers, and there really isn't a blueprint. You got to create your own, and you got to get people to get excited to kind of be part of that. And so I feel a lot of what I did of relying on my own self and using my imagination to come up with ideas is really relatable to what I do now.
And I'm intrigued by the fact that you're playing sports and Dungeons and Dragons. Was that like a typical thing in the neighborhood, or were you bridging two groups there doing that?
Yeah, it was just bridging a variety of different groups. I've always been kind of one that walked between a lot of different groups, between the jocks to the nerds to the drama kids. I have a variety of different friends in a variety of different areas.
And I bet that's got something to do with running a bank too, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what you do is how do you pull disparate people together to get organized. And you got to be able to be relatable. You can't just talk with one voice. You got to talk with many voices, especially nowadays.
David?
Yeah, Ed, you mentioned in the green room that you went to a private school and that your dad took you to school one time and said, this is the way to go and get there from now on. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, it was, it was interesting. Won a scholarship to a school in Manhattan, and it was pretty far away, about an hour and a half, 2 hours each way. And my dad just showed me once and just kind of left it and said, you're on your own. So I think a lot of it was a character building of how do you navigate New York City as a little kid and find your own ways. You got to really learn how to trust your instincts in terms of navigating difficult situations, solve your own problems, know when you're over your head and ask for help when you're lost or you're in difficult situations. And it really built a strong streak of independence and trusting your own judgment.
And how did that one lesson from your father translate to who you are in business today?
Yeah, for me, it really became down to you got to really believe in yourself and chart your own path. Being a CEO sometimes, there isn't really a blueprint or a playbook. There are people relying on you to create that blueprint. And so I think what my dad did was help me trust my own instincts and my own judgment to create that, and then start to pull people in to believe kind of that this is the right plan that we got to take.
So your nature, I thought, there's a lot of banks around. There's no book that you can read to tell you exactly what to do and how to do it?
I think one of the worst things out there, particularly in things like financial services, is relying on someone else's playbook. You really got to trust your own. I like charting my own path and creating my own plans versus trying to just copy what other people are doing.
So evidently, this bank known as Capital Bank must be different than other banks because you're the CEO and you're charting a unique course. How is this bank different than other banks?
A lot more emphasis on solutions and providing advice based on solutions versus selling products, and a lot on using technology to kind of embed those solutions in customers' hands.
So you really see a similarity between the role you played pulling the neighborhood kids together and inventing games and inviting them into games, and you also played a variety of roles on the different teams, to creating this bank. So let me ask you a question. Do you have other kids, other partners, teammates in building this bank that you treat like you did the other kids in the neighborhood when you were a kid?
Yeah, no, of course. What I try to do is give people a lot of rope to create their own world. I kind of lay out the blueprint and then help them create their own and how they paint it. So people feel like they're really running whatever it is that they're running, and I'm there to support them and help them make it successful.
Wait a minute. I thought the boss was supposed to stand up and scream and yell and tell everybody exactly what to do. That doesn't sound like that's who you are, though. Am I mistaken about that?
No, I think what it would try to do is how do you lead through others and get other people to be successful and help them create their own story and their own narrative. Everyone wants to be the lead in their own play. And so I think what my job to do is kind of set the boundaries and then help people be successful.
Matthew, what else are you thinking?
He's still a dungeon master. Do you have a favorite campaign that you created when you were a kid?
I like them all still. It's funny, when I go home, my mom still has all that stuff, so occasionally I find it under my old bed when I go home and see my mom, who's in her 90s now.
And so I can just see you looking under the bed and you get lost in it, and do you relive it all?
Yeah, those are all fond memories from my childhood, and I think it was a lot of the trust that your parents provided for you, and you really got to be your own person.
That's interesting. You keep bringing up the word trust, and I guess you have a board of directors and you also have the public. So you really you really want to be trusted, and you're not about to betray that trust, are you? That's not who you are. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of my job is how do you serve multiple stakeholders? It's not just about how do you make the most money. It's about how do you serve your board? How do you serve your community? How do you serve your employees and the government?
Well, it's fascinating hearing you say this, because it's not what you typically hear in the news, but you're not built that way. You're really built, you really are trustworthy. You're like the epitome of it. What's the website address for this Capital Bank? What's your website address?
It's capitalbankmd.com.
Let me have that one more time.
capitalbankmd.com.
We've been speaking with Ed Barry, CEO of Capital Bank, here on Executive Leaders Radio. And Mr. Matthew Shapiro, would you please do me a favor and run down who we've had the opportunity of hanging out with today?
I'd love to. It's been a really, really great show this morning. We have Peter Reily, the president and managing partner of Councilor, Buchanan and Mitchell. We had Stephanie Olson, partner at FH+H firm. We had Matthew Hutchinson, the founder, partner of Tegra Analytics. And just now wrapping up, we had Ed Barry, the CEO of Capital Bank.
I'd like to thank my co-hosts, including Matthew Shapiro from the law firm of Obermeyer, and David Scheinberg-Kresse for giving me a hand structuring the questions, hopefully providing our listening audience both an educational and an entertaining show. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com, executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. Thank you for joining us today, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.